I still remember the sound of the blades cutting through the morning air, that low, heavy rhythm that you can feel in your chest more than you can hear with your ears. It's been over 50 years, and that sound still lives somewhere deep in my head. Sometimes it sneaks back in the middle of the night, soft at first, then louder, like the past reminding me it never really left. People ask what the worst day was. I never quite know how to answer that. Every day over there had its own kind of weight, but there was one that stuck, not because of what happened, but because of what it changed in me. It started quiet, that kind of calm that always felt wrong in Vietnam. The heat was building early, the air already heavy enough to taste. I'd just finished cleaning my rifle when the sergeant walked over, a clipboard in his hand, and that look that meant orders were coming. He said 5 of us were being sent out to fill spots in another platoon, men who'd been lost the week before. We didn't ask questions. Nobody did. You just nodded, packed your gear, and got ready to move. They told us to travel light. That usually meant you were expected to move fast, and maybe not come back with everything you left with. I remember looking at the 4 guys who were going with me. None of us really knew each other that well. We'd trained together, shared tents, meals, the usual small talk about home, but you only really know someone after the first time everything goes wrong. We loaded into the helicopter just after sunrise. The rotors spun up, kicking dirt and dust into our faces. I sat near the open side door, my boots dangling over the edge, and looked out across the base as it started to shrink below us. The noise made conversation impossible, which was fine. Nobody had much to say anyway. The landscape below was a patchwork of green and brown, rivers cutting through the jungle like scars. The light hit the trees in that strange way it does in Vietnam, hazy, golden, almost too calm. The kind of calm that always felt like a lie. The pilot gave us a thumbs up and shouted something I couldn't hear. A few minutes later, the helicopter banked left and began to descend. The ride had been maybe 20 minutes, but it felt longer. My stomach always knotted during landings, not because of the height, but because once the skids hit the ground, everything real started. The jungle greeted us like it always did, thick, wet, alive. The air felt different there, heavier, like it was pressing down from all sides. We jumped out, crouched low, and formed up. The helicopter lifted off, and that was it. The sound faded, and we were alone. The platoon we were joining was already there, waiting. They looked like they hadn't slept in days. Their faces told the story before anyone spoke, tired, wary, eyes that never stopped scanning. Their lieutenant introduced himself, gave us a quick rundown of the patrol route, standard search and recon, about 10 clicks through the valley, loop around, then back by evening. Simple enough, at least on paper. You could tell the others didn't like the idea of replacements, not because they didn't need the help, but because replacements meant someone had to be replaced. It reminded everyone of why those empty spots existed in the first place. We started moving within minutes. The jungle swallowed us fast. Sunlight filtered down in broken pieces through the canopy, flickering across the ground like shifting shadows. Every step made a sound, no matter how careful you were. Leaves, branches, the constant hum of insects. The longer you were in country, the more you learned to read the jungle like a language. The sounds told you things: when birds went quiet, when the wind changed, when something felt off. That morning, something felt off almost right away. I could see it in the way the lieutenant kept glancing at his map, the way his radio man stayed too close. The silence wasn't normal. Even the insects seemed to be waiting for something. We followed a narrow trail that wound between tall bamboo and thick vines. Every now and then, we'd stop and listen, a habit drilled into us, just to make sure we weren't walking into something. The stillness was unnerving. After a couple hours, we reached a small clearing. The lieutenant signaled for a short rest. Everyone dropped their packs, took sips from their canteens, checked their gear. I remember sitting on a fallen log, watching a line of ants carry something along the dirt. Funny the details your brain clings to. That's when the radio cracked to life. Static, then a voice, broken, distorted. Couldn't make out much, just fragments. The lieutenant frowned, turned the knob, tried again. Then he looked at us and said quietly, "We're losing signal." We were deeper than we'd meant to go. The map didn't match the terrain anymore. Somewhere along the way, the trail had split, and we must have taken the wrong path. That happened more than people like to admit. In the jungle, it didn't take much to get turned around. We regrouped and pressed on, trying to find higher ground for a better signal. But the terrain kept forcing us down. Gullies, thick vegetation, tangled roots that seemed to grab your boots. The air got hotter, heavier. By early afternoon, we realized we hadn't heard from command in hours. The lieutenant's face told the truth. We were on our own for now. He ordered us to hold position and set up a temporary perimeter. Nobody complained. Everyone knew what that meant. The waiting was always the hardest part. You try to look busy, check your weapon, wipe sweat from your eyes, scan the trees, anything to keep your mind from wandering. But underneath it all, there's that slow, building pressure. The jungle plays tricks on your head. The light shifts, shadows move, sounds echo in strange ways. You start to wonder if you're imagining things. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder every few minutes, convinced something was there. We stayed like that for maybe an hour, maybe more. Time doesn't move normally out there. Every minute stretches. Then came the first distant sound, a single, low thump, too dull to be thunder. Every head turned in the same direction. The lieutenant raised his hand for silence. Nothing followed, just that endless stillness again. He looked at us, his expression unreadable, and quietly said, "Stay sharp." That was the moment the day began to turn, the moment that feeling in my gut, the one that had been whispering all morning, finally started to make sense. The air changed before anything else did. That's the thing about the jungle. You can feel it before you understand it. The stillness deepens, the sound of the wind disappears, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. That's how you know something's wrong. The lieutenant motioned for us to spread out, eyes scanning the tree line. The air was thick and hot, every breath heavy with humidity. Sweat ran down my neck and into my shirt, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was that silence, that unnatural, complete silence. We waited, a minute, maybe two. Then, faintly, I heard it, a whisper of movement somewhere out there, too soft to be footsteps, too steady to be the wind. I caught a glimpse of motion between two trees, something small and fast, gone before I could even be sure I'd seen it. The lieutenant gave the signal to pull back toward higher ground. We moved slowly, every sense on edge. The path curved upward along a ridge, but the vegetation was so thick we could barely see a few feet ahead. Branches scratched at our faces and arms as we climbed. The jungle wasn't just around us anymore. It was closing in. When we reached the top of the ridge, we stopped again. From there, the view opened slightly, enough to see more jungle stretching out below, endless and green. And somewhere out there, in that sea of trees, I could feel eyes on us. The radio operator tried again, his voice low but steady. Static, then silence. He looked up, shook his head. No contact, no signal. That was the moment I realized we weren't lost anymore. We were cut off. The lieutenant ordered us to hold position and dig in for the night if necessary. He tried to sound calm, but you could hear the edge in his voice. We all heard it. We formed a loose perimeter, found what cover we could, and settled in. Hours crawled by. The sun burned low, and shadows stretched long through the trees. Every sound felt amplified. A leaf falling, a branch creaking, a breath drawn too quickly. No one spoke. We didn't have to. The fear was a shared thing, thick in the air between us. At some point, I caught Marcus, one of the guys from my original unit, staring into the trees like he was seeing something far away. He didn't blink for a long time, When I whispered his name, he flinched, then forced a grin. "Just thinking about home," he said, but his voice didn't sound like it belonged to him. We all had that look by then, like we were there and somewhere else at the same time. The night came fast. That's another thing about the jungle. Daylight doesn't fade, it just disappears. 1 second you can see, and the next you're wrapped in black. We set up in a small circle, shoulders touching, eyes trying to adjust to the dark. The noises came back after sundown, the insects, the frogs, all of it. And under it all, something else, something we couldn't name. Every minute felt stretched, pulled tight. You tell yourself to breathe slow, to stay calm, to keep your mind where your feet are. But it's hard when the dark feels alive. We took turns on watch, one man at a time while the others tried to rest. Nobody really slept. I remember lying there, the ground damp beneath me, staring up at the faint glow of the canopy, listening to the soft hum of the jungle and the pounding in my own chest. At some point in the early hours, I thought I heard someone whisper my name. It was soft, like a voice carried by the wind. I sat up, turned, but everyone was where they'd been. No one else moved. I told myself I imagined it, that the mind plays tricks when fear and exhaustion mix. By dawn, the air felt cooler, but not by much. We were supposed to meet another unit that morning at a rendezvous point. The lieutenant decided we'd head out early, try to move before the heat came back. The jungle looked different in the morning light, calmer, almost peaceful, but it was a lie. The silence was still there beneath the surface, like something waiting to wake up. We started moving again, single file. The path sloped downward, winding through a dense patch of trees. Every few minutes we'd stop and listen. Nothing, just the endless hum of insects. After maybe an hour, we came across a small stream, narrow but fast-moving. The lieutenant signaled for a short break so we could refill canteens. I crouched beside the water, scooped a handful to my face, and felt the chill of it cut through the heat. It was the first real relief I'd felt in hours. Then came the sound, distant again, but closer this time, a sharp, quick burst of something echoing through the trees. We froze. The lieutenant held up his hand, eyes searching the ridgeline above us. No movement, but the sound lingered in the air like an echo of something unfinished. He motioned for the platoon to tighten up and move back across the stream. We did, fast but quiet, weapons up, eyes everywhere. That's when the jungle erupted in sound. Not the kind that tells you what's happening, but the kind that takes all sense away. It was chaos, pure and instant. Voices, shouts, the crash of branches. I dropped low, instinct more than thought, pressing myself against the roots of a tree. The lieutenant's voice cut through the noise, giving orders I could barely make out. We started to pull back toward the ridge, but the way we came was gone, thick with movement, impossible to tell where to go. Minutes passed like seconds. Every direction looked the same. The jungle swallowed everything, vision, sound, even time. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The noise, the motion, everything. Silence again, the kind that hurts your ears because it shouldn't exist. We didn't talk for a long time. The lieutenant finally gathered us close, voice low. "We're surrounded," he said, calm but certain. "We hold position until we can raise command." No one argued. There was nothing else to do. We set up a tight defensive ring, each man covering a different angle. The radio man kept working the dial, repeating the same call signs, hoping someone, anyone, would answer. Static. Always static. The heat pressed down like a weight. The hours dragged. Sweat ran into my eyes, stinging. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, though I wasn't cold. At one point, Marcus leaned toward me and whispered, "They know we're here." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We all knew. The waiting stretched on until it stopped feeling like time at all. Just a long, endless moment where nothing happened and everything might. Every sound, every rustle of leaves, every distant crack felt like it carried meaning. The jungle felt alive again, breathing all around us, patient and watchful. By late afternoon, the light began to fade again. The lieutenant told us to stay alert and conserve our energy. He tried to sound like this was temporary, like we'd be fine. But his eyes betrayed him. They always do. We didn't know it yet. But that night would become the kind of memory that doesn't fade, not even after half a century. Night fell like a curtain being dropped by an unseen hand. One moment there was color in the trees, the next, the jungle turned to a silhouette of black shapes stacked against deeper black. We tightened the perimeter until shoulders nearly touched. The lieutenant crawled around, checking each sector, whispering reminders. Short bursts on the radio, every 15, rotate watch, drink water, even if you don't feel like it. He sounded steady, and maybe he was. Or maybe that's what command school teaches you to sound like when your options are running thin. Moisture gathered on everything, webbing, sleeves, the backs of our hands, until it felt like we were breathing through cloth. The ground gave off its own heat. It rose in waves, met the damp air, and hung there, trapped under the leaves. I could feel each breath come back at me, warm and stale. Somewhere above us, a bird called out once, twice, then quit. No answer. Nothing but the small creaks of trunks as the canopy shifted, and the muted tick of sweat dropping off a helmet rim. We set a rhythm. Every few minutes, the radio man, Hughes, would key the mic and try again. He kept it polite, by the book, like he was calling a front desk at a hotel. Then he'd wait, head tilted, eyes closed to listen deeper into the static, as if he could hear meaning inside it. He'd shake his head and pass the handset back to his chest. 15 more minutes. Try again. The jungle, patient as stone, took the sound and folded it into itself. My watch came up around midnight. Marcus slid over and pressed a canteen into my palm. "Sip," he said, voice so low it felt like a thought more than a word. When I nodded, he added, "You seeing anything?" "Just the inside of my own head," I said. He huffed a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "Careful in there." I took my sector, 2 trees leaning together like a doorway, the space beyond them clogged with vines, and settled into the long stare. That's what standing watch is. A disciplined, unblinking look into nothing until the nothing rearranges itself. Your eyes invent patterns, then lose them, then find them again. I tracked a faint shift of leaves, then realized it was my pulse nudging the sight-post a fraction at a time. I reset my elbows, slowed my breathing, and let the minutes stretch. Somewhere behind me, a pair of gloves rasped against canvas, somebody wrestling a strap tighter or loosening one. The sound felt too loud, then vanished. On my left, the lieutenant moved with the deliberate care of someone trying not to make the night remember him. He squatted next to Hughes, checked the handset, and touched the antenna like he was reassuring a skittish animal. The first thing that tried to break us wasn't noise, or hunger, or even fear. It was time. The kind that doesn't pass. The kind that turns your thoughts into little loops. I caught myself rehearsing the same useless questions. Why here? Why this route? Why didn't we turn back after the clearing? The mind wants reasons, and the jungle doesn't. It offers only position and consequence. A breeze crawled across the ridge and brought with it the faintest hint of smoke. Not sharp, not close, just a memory of a campfire on a far hillside. 100 meanings bloomed and died in my head. I raised a hand and opened and closed it twice, the signal along our line for smell. Hands moved down the ring, repeating it. The lieutenant slipped to me, leaned in until his shoulder touched mine, and breathed shallow through his nose. He didn't react, but his hand found my forearm and squeezed once. Not fear, not comfort, just, "I'm here." I heard it too. Hughes tried the radio again at the top of the hour. This time, the static unfurled a shape that might have been a voice, might have been a glitch of atmosphere. We froze and listened to nothing like it was something. Then the channel flattened out again. The lieutenant made a small mark on his map anyway, as if the act of believing could move us an inch closer to being found. Rain came without warning. Not a storm, just a slow, steady fall that thickened the air and painted every leaf with shine. It softened the ground, and the edges of sound turned footsteps, whoever's, wherever they might be, into guesses. We pulled Poncos up and hunched under their clammy shelter. Drops drummed on hoods and flowed along our noses. The taste was metal and leaf. Rain makes the world smaller. The ring of vision around each of us shrank to a few yards. Beyond that, only gray. The lieutenant shuffled our positions a few feet inward so the line overlapped, belt buckles almost touching. "If we have to move," he whispered, "we move like a hinge. Left stays, right swings. No gaps." He said it twice in case anyone's brain was lagging behind the words. For a long time, nothing happened, which is not the same thing as being safe. Then, from somewhere low on the slope, a branch cracked. Not loud, not close, but it had weight. We held. Another crack. Then a cascade of drips that could have been rain shaken off a frond, or a sleeve brushing a leaf, or nothing at all. I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth clicked. I forced it loose. "Don't chase it with your eyes," Marcus breathed. "Let it come to you." "Copy," I said, and I did. I widened my focus until the doorway of trees became a flat sheet of dark with a dozen possible edges. If something slid across it, I'd see the outline. And if I didn't, well, that was a kind of answer too. Around 2, the lieutenant crawled to the center of our circle, set the map on a dry bag, and spoke just loud enough to carry to all of us in turn. "We're holding until dawn." At first light, we pushed to that knuckle of high ground we crossed before the stream. Antenna might pull enough to hit someone. If we can't, we pop smoke for a scout bird. He paused, and I could hear him choose the next words like tools from a kit. "We're not alone out here. That's fine. We don't need alone. We need disciplined. Eyes open, minds quiet. We move like we've trained." It wasn't a speech. It was alignment. He looked at each of us in the dark and waited until he felt the click. Man to plan, plan to man. I gave my watch to David from Texas, who took it with the same expression he wore for everything, like he'd seen worse weather. He settled in, shoulders squared against a tree, and let the rain stripe his cheeks. I lay back on the damp ground and let my spine find the roots. I told myself to sleep, even if it was only the kind that keeps your eyes closed. Instead, I drifted sideways into old pictures. A porch at dusk, the screen door that never quite latched. My mom humming the same 3 bars of a song she didn't know the words to. The brain is a kind liar. It puts you somewhere gentle, right before it reminds you where you are. I woke to the light altering, not brightening, the pre-dawn hour when color returns in secret. Shapes pulled themselves out of the night. The rain had stopped. The world held a breath again, but it wasn't the same as yesterday's. This one had a direction to it. "On me," the lieutenant whispered. We tightened straps, cleared throats softly, and rose into crouches. Hughes clipped the long whip antenna to a branch he could break free and carry like a standard. We left the shallow impressions of our night behind and began to slide along the ridge, one careful step at a time. The ground was slick. Mud tried to steal our heels with each push. Our line moved like a slow current along the contour, left side anchoring, right side swinging a yard at a time. The jungle's first noises came back with the light. Cheers, ticks, distant trill, like the world turning itself on. For a while, I let those sounds lull me. They stacked up into the idea of normal. Then I heard a different rhythm moving under them. Not footsteps, not speech, just intention gathering, the way wind gathers before it shows in the trees. We crested a small rise and saw the knuckle of high ground ahead. Not a clearing, exactly, but a shoulder where the canopy thinned and the trunks broke into a looser arrangement. If we could plant ourselves there, we could pull a sliver more sky and maybe, finally, a voice. "Last 30 yards are open," the lieutenant said. "Pairs, leapfrogs. When you move, you own it. When you stop, you are stone." He sent David and Tommy first. They slid low, a blur of cloth and boot, then settled behind a downed log with bark chewed off by weather. Marcus and I went next. 10 yards felt like 100. I could hear my own breath and the small grind of grit under my kneecaps. We reached a tree with a trunk as wide as a truck tire and pressed to it, counting heartbeats. The next pair came, then the last. We had the knuckle. It wasn't much 2 degrees more sky, a line of sight that reached a dozen paces further, but it felt like an accomplishment in a world that had stopped offering those up. Up, the lieutenant told Hughes, and Hughes raised the antenna as high as his arm would reach, then higher, standing on the log. He keyed the mic. The words were the same. The hope was not. We leaned into the idea that radio waves might find a gap between leaves, slip along some invisible seam, and land where a human could catch them. Static. Then a fracture in the noise. Then, like something viewed across heat shimmer, a voice wobbled into shape. Copy, say again, read you, weak. Hughes nearly laughed, then caught it and turned it into a cough. The lieutenant took the handset, spoke the call signs with the gentle insistence of someone coaxing a child down from a ladder. He sent grid references, adjusted them, confirmed, corrected. The voice came back, stronger now, wrapped in the miracle of syllables that weren't ours. Holds, scoutbird, window, mark if able. Smoke on my mark, the lieutenant said, and his tone, firm, brisk, reached into my chest and set things back in order. He looked at the canopy above, then at us. If anyone's watching, they'll see it too. That's fine. We're not ghosts today. We're a problem to be solved. He pulled a colored can from his pouch, but didn't pop it yet. He scanned the trees a last time, counting something only he could see, then nodded. Mark. The can hissed to life, and a column of thick color punched into the leaves and broke apart, wandering up in segments. It looked wrong and beautiful at once, unnatural pigment stitched onto a natural sky. We watched it rise, each of us thinking our private version of the same thought. Please let somebody be looking. The jungle did not approve or object. It simply received. Minutes collect in handfuls at times like that. We watched the gap in the canopy as if the act of staring could widen it. The sound we were waiting for was the sound that had begun this whole day, blades. I held my breath and listened for that low, chest-deep thrum. Nothing. Then a far hint. Then, suddenly, certainty. Faint at first, swelling as if the air itself had decided to beat time. Eyes up, the lieutenant said. If he can't see us, we make ourselves known. Panels out. We pulled bright panels from our packs, squares of loud color meant to argue with green, and spread them across the log and the exposed patch of ground. The thrum grew teeth. Leaves trembled. A churn of air riffled through the branches and pressed our shirts against our ribs. I felt relief start to uncurl in me, cautious and small. Then, as the vibrations stacked into a full living roar, the jungle answered back, not with panic, not with a rush, but with the simple fact of movement in places there hadn't been any. Hold, the lieutenant said, calm and sharp at once. We're not done yet. The story of that day had just found its next shape. The sound grew louder, a deep mechanical heartbeat rolling through the valley. We looked toward the canopy, trying to guess where it would break through. The color smoke rose in slow spirals, curling into the open air. For a moment, I believed we were finally about to leave that ridge behind. Then, from somewhere below us, the jungle shifted. A single burst of noise cracked through the rhythm of the blades. Quick, distant, impossible to place. We froze, half crouched, hands gripping rifles that suddenly felt heavier than before. The lieutenant's eyes met mine. He didn't say a word, but I could see it in his face. We're still not clear. The helicopter appeared overhead, a dark shape cutting through light and haze. Its rotors churned the air until the trees bent and leaves ripped loose, spiraling upward like green confetti. The door gunner leaned out, scanning the ridge, his headset pressed tight. I could almost make out his face. The lieutenant grabbed the radio. Smoke visible, ridge secure, requesting immediate lift. His voice was steady, clipped, controlled. He waited, head tilted toward the handset. Static answered. Then a burst of sound, half a word, maybe 2 before the signal cut again. Repeat, confirm ridge secure, requesting immediate lift. Another pause. The air around us vibrated with the noise of the helicopter circling, its engines straining against the heat. The lieutenant lowered the mic, jaw tight. He didn't need to tell us what that meant. They couldn't land yet. The pilot didn't have a clear spot. We'd have to move. He pointed toward a nearby slope where the trees thinned, a narrow rise that looked barely big enough for a helicopter skid. "That's our spot," he said. "We move now, tight formation. Keep eyes up, watch the canopy." We started forward, one cautious step at a time, climbing toward the opening. The air whipped harder as the helicopter adjusted, the sound hammering through the trees. Dust and leaves swirled around us, stinging our eyes. Every instinct screamed to hurry, but haste was the kind of mistake you didn't get to repeat. Halfway up the slope, I heard the radio crackle again. Hugh's voice shouting over the noise. "They've got us. They see the smoke." The rest was lost in static. I turned toward him, but before I could speak, the lieutenant waved his hand down, signaling for silence. The jungle below was no longer still. I couldn't see anything, just the shifting blur of branches, but I felt it. A pressure, a presence. The kind of awareness that makes your heart beat behind your eyes. "Keep moving," the lieutenant shouted, his voice swallowed by the helicopter's roar. We pushed forward, scrambling over roots slick with rain. The ground fell away on one side, steep enough that a single misstep could send you sliding into the trees. I glanced back once and saw Marcus hauling Hughes by the strap of his pack, urging him forward. We were maybe 30 yards from the clearing when the lieutenant stopped short, crouching low. His head turned sharply to the right, eyes locked on something I couldn't see. Then, in a tone barely above a whisper, he said down. We dropped to the ground in unison, pressing against the slope. The air churned above us as the helicopter made another slow pass, circling, waiting for the signal to land. My hand sank into the wet earth. The jungle held its breath again, that terrible, heavy stillness that only comes right before something breaks. A few seconds passed. Then a faint voice came over the radio, calm, mechanical, all business, visual on smoke. Need clear landing. Hold tight. The lieutenant raised his head just enough to see the canopy. We're clear, he said, half to himself. Then louder, into the mic, clearing confirmed. Bring it in. The answer was a low rumble as the helicopter dropped lower, branches tearing loose, rotor wash flattening the grass. It felt like the entire jungle was being pulled upward by force. The noise was deafening. For a brief moment, it looked like the bird might actually land. Then the world tipped sideways again. The noise from below, the one we'd felt more than heard, came alive all at once, shouting, crashing. A wave of unseen movement through the trees. The lieutenant's face hardened. Move, he yelled. Get to that chopper? Now. There was no hesitation. We sprinted up the slope, the wind from the rotors fighting against us. The ground shook beneath our feet as branches whipped across our faces. The helicopter dipped lower, skids hovering a few feet above the earth. The door gunner leaned out, waving us forward. The lieutenant reached the edge first, grabbed the skid, and hauled himself up. Hughes followed, clutching the radio like a lifeline. Marcus was right behind him, then David. I was the last one on the slope, the wind pushing so hard I could barely stay upright. I jumped for the open door, grabbed the metal frame, and felt a pair of hands yank me inside. The lieutenant banged on the cockpit glass. Go, go. The helicopter lifted, rising fast, the jungle dropping away beneath us. I looked out through the open door as the ridge shrank, the trees blurring into a single mass of green. My ears rang from the noise, my eyes stung from the dust. No one spoke. We just sat there, gripping the floor, breathing in short, stunned bursts. The flight back felt like a dream. The world below looked impossibly calm, sunlight flickering across rivers and fields, a landscape that hid everything we'd just crawled through. Hughes kept one hand on the radio, even though no one was calling anymore. Marcus stared out the open side, expression blank. The lieutenant sat across from me, map still clutched in his hand, knuckles white around the edge. When we landed, the base looked the same as it always did. Organized chaos, noise, motion. But the people waiting near the pad looked different when they saw us. They counted the helmets. They knew how many went out and how many came back. The lieutenant gave a short report, clipped and professional. Unit extracted from ridge west of Sector 9. Radio interference, possible contact, no confirmation. He spoke like he was reading numbers off a chart. When he finished, he folded the map once and tucked it into his pocket. His hands shook only slightly. We were sent to the mess tent first, told to eat something, drink water, rest. I remember sitting at the long metal table, tray untouched, just staring at the tin cup in front of me. The sound of the helicopter still thudded inside my skull. The world felt off balance, like I'd stepped off a moving walkway and forgotten how to stand still. Marcus sat across from me, rubbing at a spot on his sleeve that wasn't there. He looked up once, met my eyes, and said quietly, "We got lucky." I nodded, but the word didn't feel right. Luck was supposed to feel like relief. This didn't. That night, I lay in my cot and listened to the bass settling around me. The hum of generators, the far-off clatter of tools, someone laughing 2 tents over. The ordinary sounds of a place where everyone pretended the world wasn't trying to erase them. I closed my eyes and saw the jungle again, saw the smoke rising through the trees, saw the color fade as the helicopter climbed. The memory replayed like a film reel with no ending. We didn't talk much about that day afterward. The lieutenant filed his report, and the paperwork said, "Successful extraction, minimal losses." That's how the system worked. Everything fit into a sentence. But the truth doesn't fit that neatly. The truth lingers. It follows you home. Years later, when people ask what Vietnam was like, I always tell them it depends on the day. Some days were endless routine, marching, cleaning, waiting. Others, like that one, felt like standing on the edge of the world, watching it tilt. I think about that ridge sometimes, the way the air felt right before the noise, the way time seemed to stretch thin enough to see through. I think about how close the sky looked from there, how small we were beneath it. After I came home, life kept moving, as it always does. I went back to work, bought a car, tried to live like before, but the noise never really left. Certain sounds, a fan blade, a passing plane, still pull me backward for a second, long enough to remember that feeling. The waiting, the uncertainty, the weight of the air before it breaks. People like to talk about closure. They think it's a moment, a final chapter you can close and shelve. But there's no closure to something that becomes part of you. The war didn't end for me when I left Vietnam. It just got quieter. Sometimes, late at night, I'll sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the wind move through the trees. When it's still enough, I can almost hear it, that low, rhythmic thump of the helicopter blades fading into distance. It doesn't scare me anymore. It's just part of the landscape of my mind. A reminder of the day we walked into the jungle and somehow found our way back out. Not everyone did. I think about the faces that blurred together in the heat, the ones whose names I never learned, the replacements, the friends, the ones who taught me what courage really looks like, not the movie kind, but the quiet kind that just keeps moving forward. When I look back now, that's what I remember most. Not the fear, not the confusion, but the way we kept going, even when we didn't know if there was anywhere left to go. The way each of us carried a piece of the others, even when the noise faded and the years piled up. I still keep the map the lieutenant used that day. The paper's soft now. The edges worn from being folded and unfolded too many times. The ink has faded, but you can still see the ridge, the stream, the small clearing we called the landing zone. I don't know why I've kept it this long. Maybe because it's proof that the place was real, that we were real. That for one long day, 5 men who barely knew each other held their ground, and made it home. That's the thing they don't tell you about survival. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like carrying. You carry the heat, the noise, the faces, the silence that comes afterward. You learn to live with all of it, because letting go isn't really an option. Some days, it feels far away, like a story that happened to someone else. Other days, I'll hear a distant helicopter, and I'm right back there, feeling the ground tremble beneath me. The years between then and now disappear, and I'm 19 again, gripping a rifle in the jungle, watching smoke rise through the trees and hoping someone sees it. People think war is about fighting, but the truth is, most of it is waiting for orders, for morning, for rescue, for the sound of a voice that means you're not alone. That's what I remember most about that day, the waiting. The hope threaded through the fear. We waited for hours that felt like years, and when help finally came, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like relief and exhaustion rolled into one. It felt like breathing again after holding it for too long. Sometimes I wonder what the others remember. Marcus, David, Hughes, where they are now, if they made peace with it, if they still hear the blades in their sleep. I hope they do sometimes. Not because I want them haunted, but because I want them to remember that we made it out together, that we mattered. The world moves on quickly. Wars end, names fade, photographs yellow with age, but certain days refuse to fade. They live in the space between memory and dream, real enough to touch, distant enough to hurt. That ridge, that smoke, that endless noise, it's all still there somewhere in the quiet corners of the mind where time folds in on itself. I've learned not to fight it. I just let it play, like an old film running on loop. When it ends, I take a breath, sip my coffee, and remind myself, I made it home. That's what matters. Not because it makes me special, but because it makes me responsible. For remembering, for telling, for keeping the story alive for the ones who didn't. And so I tell it again and again, not to relive it, but to make sure it isn't lost. The jungle, the ridge, the waiting, the sound of the helicopter blades fading into sky. The moment the world narrowed to 5 men trying to find a way out, and somehow did. That was my worst day, and in some strange way, it was also the day I understood what it means to hold on, not to hope, or fear, or even to life itself, but to each other. Because in the end, that's all any of us really had.